Hello, I'm Susan Brinton.
And I'm Sharon McGowan.
We're very pleased to be here speaking about issues that are close to our hearts, and we thank you for the opportunity.
This chapter was written from our point of view as professionals and activists, with between us over 80 years working in a wide range of leadership roles in Canada's film and television industry.
The chapter explores how women in Canada have historically been vastly underrepresented and underfunded in our film and television industry, but how, in the past 5 years, there have been some very promising developments.
In that time, all of Canada's major funding agencies for feature film and television, as well as our national broadcaster, have developed policies with timelines and targets to reach gender equity in creative leadership positions and in the proportion of funding they distribute. And these policies have begun to yield some results.
For example, at Telefilm Canada, our feature film funding agency, there's been a major increase in women directors working on higher budget films from just 19% 3 years ago to 42% in the last year. In this same time period, overall projects with women directors jumped to 42% of Telefilm's overall funding, an increase of 14%.
In our chapter, we discuss how dramatic changes like this don't happen overnight. They're the work of decades of work leading They are the result of decades of work leading to multiple factors coming together at the right time in a climate conducive to change. To give you the highlights from our chapter, the 9 factors we saw that led to this recent change were:
first, detailed gender data and analysis produced by women's media groups over more than a decade provided unequivocal evidence of the seriousness of the problem of gender inequality in Canada's screen-based industry. This was crucial to convince industry leaders there was a problem. Without the hard evidence, it was impossible to make the case.
2. Coalitions of women's media groups from across the country provided a vital source of strength, information sharing, and united action. In particular, a summit that was held in 2014 at the St. John's International Women's Film Festival brought together 11 women's media groups representing 40,000 people, and they published 7 recommendations for change that drove the issues and actions forward.
Third, the Canadian film and television industry is heavily subsidized by our government, which made it possible for us to subject its lack of gender equity to public scrutiny and allowed us to advocate for change through official channels, focusing on the 3 main funding agencies and the national public broadcaster.
Fourth, Canadian broadcasters are regulated by a government commission whose processes are open for public intervention, allowing us to successfully lobby over a number of years for the private broadcasters to commit to ensuring gender equity in the programming they commission.
5. Anna Serter's leadership at the Swedish Film Institute challenged public agencies around the world to take responsibility for gender equality in their funding structures, and this had a tremendous impact in Canada. Until then, none of our government funders had made gender equality a priority at all.
6. A new Canadian government elected in 2015 had the first gender-balanced cabinet and a self-described feminist prime minister, and made examining all government money through a gender lens a top priority. This meant that all our public funding agencies were suddenly more willing to hear from us about our ideas for creating gender equity in the industry.
7. A commitment by our national film producer, the National Film Board, to a policy of gender equity in all its funding and creative leadership positions galvanized other funders, since the NFB, as a government producer, had the power to make change swiftly and use this freedom to take the lead, motivating other agencies to follow suit.
Number 8. The Me Too movement brought increased worldwide attention to the prevalence of gender inequality in the film and television industry, putting it more firmly on the agenda for agencies and organizations in Canada.
9. And finally, Canada's industry has a long history of feminist activism, from film collectives to the NFB's Academy Award-winning Studio D, the first government-funded feminist film studio in the world. That historic activism informed the women working today who have volunteered their time, energy, and resources to continue this critical work.
In addition to examining the factors contributing to recent progress, our chapter also looks at what's next in Canada's movement toward greater gender equality in our screen industries. As what has happened to date is only a beginning, there is so much more to do. Most importantly, we need to ensure that all programs for gender equity in our industry are truly intersectional. Indigenous women, racialized women, and women from other marginalized communities have not seen anywhere near the opportunities and progress from recent initiatives as white women have. This is a violation of human rights and a major creative and economic loss to both these women and to our country.
Also, Canadian film and television equity policies to date have only addressed key creative leadership positions, but the vast majority of people working in film and television, including performers or crew, where women continue to be underrepresented. Government funding and mechanisms that support these positions, such as labor tax credits to producers, need to employ gender equity and inclusion mechanisms to help break this pattern of systemic exclusion.
Finally, in closing, while we don't address the pandemic in our chapter as it was written in the before times, we would like to say that what we've learned about creating change feels as applicable now as it was then, if not more.
The essential work of gathering data, building coalitions, and advocating for a more equitable and inclusive future is something that we believe can sustain us and propel us forward through these difficult and uncertain times. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Please stay safe.